Okay, this is video 2 and we'll be discussing the memory and I/O tab. What you'll see when you first install TitanBoost is you'll see it configured like this in the memory tab, right? First we have your memory budgets. Okay, this allows TitanBoost to use a certain amount of RAM to optimize performance for your game. We have the VRAM budget and the RAM budget. The VRAM budget does not consume VRAM. Although it is tied to VRAM subsystems, it does not use VRAM, it will consume RAM. So as it is configured by default, TitanBoost is going to be occupying 1 GB of RAM in total. This plus this is 1 GB. Okay. If you feel you don't have much space, you can reduce this. Okay. If you feel you don't have that extra gig of RAM, you can reduce this, but you need to specify. You don't have to, but I recommend that you allocate something. Okay, even if it's just like 128 each. Okay, which means 256 megabytes of RAM in total. Okay. Now there's the high performance profile. If you enable this, that'll allow TitanBoost to consume more RAM if it sees that doing so will improve performance. And this matters especially if you've specified something low like 256 total, right? 128. If you enable the high performance profile and TitanBoost sees that it could gain more by occupying a bit more space, that means instead of 256, it could end up consuming 300 megabytes. Okay. But if you've already given it everything it needs, like for example, I've got 32 gigs of RAM, so I can give it plenty of memory here. I can give it a total of 6 gigabytes, 4 gigs for RAM and 2 gigs for VRAM. I can give it a total of 6 gigabytes and enable the high performance profile. This will optimize the manner in which this is allocated. So you will get better performance with this enabled, but it might not overshoot the 6 gigs that I've probably won't. In fact, it almost certainly won't overshoot the 6 gigs that I've specified. In fact, it probably doesn't need anything like 6 gigs. It might only need, 1 gig here and 3 gig here at most, but yeah. So anyways, as you don't have to specify anything high, specify what you have available for your system. Okay, I just have a lot of memory, so I don't have to be stingy with this. Next we have the custom access range. Now what this is usually when you're playing a game, let's say the game is occupying 8 gigs of RAM. Okay, the operating system doesn't truly believe your game needs 8 gigs of RAM. That's how things work. Okay, while you're playing, sometimes what the OS does is it likes to let's say reallocate certain portions of the game's memory space for other processes or applications. Even if you have plenty of RAM, the operating system likes to do this, and the reasons it does is technical. Okay, but it can do with like congruency of memory space and stuff like that. That's a long story. That's not necessary for this. But what you should know is what this custom access range does is when you are playing your game, you don't need the operating system playing with your game's memory space. Okay, the memory heap of your game is the memory heap of your game. So your game needs to be selfish and shouldn't allow the OS to do things that won't take into consideration the fact that you want performance. So this maximum value does not mean the game is going to occupy 16 gigs. No. If your game only occupies 8 gigs, it will still only occupy 8 gigs. But what this does is, however much memory that the game actually needs, the game will actually have access to without the operating system playing with that memory while you're playing. Because when the operating system does that, that's what causes micro stylus and stuff like that. Okay, so you can just leave this as it is. Unless your game does occupy more than 16 gigs of RAM, then you need to raise this maximum value. Okay, as for the minimum value, you should just leave this as it is. Don't change it, because this is just for the sake of, let's say, the technicality of how the operating system understands your game's request for memory. Okay, this is just the minimum. In other words, you are guaranteeing the game at least this, but you know that the game will have access to at most this if it needs it, or if it requires more, you should raise this value from 16 to 20 or whatever it is that the game actually needs. But leave this at 512, because if you think I've got 14 gigs of RAM and the game's only occupying 8 gigs, plus everything, maybe the game plus everything is maybe occupying like 10 gigs, 11 gigs, and you think, oh well, it's 8 gigs of RAM, I can allocate 6 gigs. That's a mistake. Don't do that, because the way the operating system sees available RAM is different from your understanding of available RAM. So even if you have 32 gigs of RAM, don't think because the game occupies 8 gig, you can specify a minimum of 6. No, don't do that. Just leave this at 512. What matters, you could even say 124, but what does that do? Don't do that. Leave it at 512. This is really what matters. Okay. Now, buffer locking. Buffer locking is very important, particularly for TitanBoost. If you have specified anything here, buffer locking will help ensure that what you've determined here as well does not get meddled with, and TitanBoost has the proper access to this memory so that it can optimize performance for your game. So I do recommend you enable buffer locking always. Okay. Now we have the memory management mode. This you should be careful with if you're playing an online game, because if you enable the engine hooking, that then gives you access to these memory hooking options. Some online games can see that as interfering. They'll think you're trying to cheat or something like that. You know, it can trigger anti-cheat. So only do this for offline games, or if you know the offline, or if you know the particular online game won't have any issues with the anti-cheat, then you can enable this. Okay. But what this will do is it will in real time optimize the manner in which your game uses its memory while you play. Okay. We have several options here, and because memory, especially real-time memory management of a foreign process like another game, something like that can be very finicky. So most games won't have any issues with these options, but some games you might find that maybe this option causes it to crash. So what you can do is test on a game-by-game basis, right? So you could enable this first. This memory, the memory stabilizer should work for pretty much all games. Okay, most games as well, this will support it very well. This as well, most games will work well with. In fact, yeah, most of these settings, most games will have no issue with. Some games might have an issue with the memory isolation layer. For example, I think Red Dead Redemption 2 had an issue with the memory isolation layer, if I recall. But yeah, the best is just to enable one by one, play the game. If there is a bit of an issue, if the game is not compatible with any of these, then the game would crash. But the game would not crash while you're playing it. No, it would crash in the main menu or something like that. So the likelihood of the game crashing, if there's an issue here, if the likelihood of it crashing while you're playing is very, very low. It's almost guaranteed not to do that. It would only crash in the main menu or something like that, or while loading, just to show you that, okay, no, this maybe this option isn't good, or this option isn't good. Okay, right. But for most games, my favorite combo is always this. These four. This is my favorite combo. I love it. Works very well. Now we have the termination assist. Okay, because of the manner in which the memory is being optimized in real time, when you enable any of these, what can happen is sometimes a game, when you have closed the game, like let's say you've quit the game, sometimes what will happen is you've closed the game, but the game doesn't really close, right? Because TitanBoost still has a hold of the memory. Sometimes. For a lot of games, the game will close, but some games, they wouldn't close. In other words, it would still be in the background and consuming RAM, especially, well, not the game itself, but TitanBoost, if you specified anything here, might still be operating in the background, okay, because the game process is still alive, even though you've closed it. And that can happen with some games if you've enabled these memory hooking options. So the termination assist is to assist with that, okay. In that event, as long as you have this enabled, once you close the game will then close. The TitanBoost will close the game safely and nicely. Or what happens sometimes if if you have these memory hooking options enabled, sometimes what that does is when you close the game appears to hang. The game doesn't close, it just stays there in that menu and doesn't close and stuff like that. If that happens, as long as you have this enabled, just wait maybe 10 seconds or so, and TitanBoost will safely close the game for you. So that's what the termination assist is for. So you can enable that just in case a particular game has that issue. When you close the game, if the game hangs when you have this, or if it appears to hang, as long as you have the termination assist enabled, after 10 seconds or so, the game will close safely. Okay. Now here we have the memory and I/O priority. Now, by default, this is a pretty good config. Memory priority is perfectly fine at highest, but I/O priority should be at above normal. For some games you could push it to highest, but for most games, the vast majority of games, keep this at above normal, not at highest, because pushing IO priority to highest can starve the operating system of IO, okay? Because you're telling the game to consume all of it, to be really greedy, and the operating system doesn't like that. For most situations. For some games it's okay, or for some systems and system configs it's okay. All right. And IO, I mean, that's everything from your mouse, controllers, stuff like that. Even rendering, okay, because of course it has to interact with the rest of the system. This IO is, you know, your entire system, let's say. Okay, so keep this at above normal, and this memory can be at highest. Great. Adaptive memory boost, what this will do is prime the memory space for a more efficient arrangement. Okay, let's leave it at that because it gets deeper, but that's not necessary. It's not necessary to discuss all that. I mean, for what reason? People don't really care. Anyways, adaptive memory boost, enable this. It's great. Now here we have streaming optimization. What this will do is it will optimize into memory the kind of information that the game usually needs. Okay, because what happens is when you're playing a game, you'll find that sometimes you encounter these micro stutters because it's having to load assets in real time. Okay, what this will do is, in addition to a couple of our optimizations, it'll make sure that the game has access to that already. So with what memory optimization will do, the streaming optimization is, what the hell is going on? I guess it's too early, you know. So I'm, you know, out here, you know, garbling my words and whatever. Right. So streaming optimization, what this will do is it'll consume more RAM, but reduce the likelihood of stuttering. And there are levels as well. There's light, there's moderate, and there's aggressive. At the more aggressive level, you'll have more RAM being occupied. When I tested this on Red Dead Redemption, that usually consumes 12 gigs. At the aggressive level, it consumed, I think, a total of 14 gigs, so an additional 2 gigs of RAM. Okay. Now we have memory optimization. What this will do is increase the speed at which your game has access to its memory, okay, to various assets that it needs to have access to while you're playing. Okay. Memory optimization does not consume more RAM, but in order to have this work, you'll need to enable SE lock memory privilege. You can go here, instructions, Control F, SE lock. So you can search for that, and here it is. You see, this will tell you how to enable that for your operating system. Okay, that's what you'll need to do in order for the memory optimization to actually work. Okay. All right, and I believe that's it for the memory section, memory and IO. We will discuss next the automatic thread booster in the next video. Okay, cheers.